Hi guys, today I'll be covering scenario exploration number 9 for Hurdle Task 2. So our scenario is Zach, who has an above average intelligence and loves being the class clown. His work is below average, and he comes from a home that doesn't value education. He loves making wisecracks, getting his mates to laugh. He is a very skilled skateboarder and spends hours each day perfecting his routines. He is the leader of the influential skateboard clique in the school. Grades, staying out of school, parent conferences, even being suspended do not seem to concern him at all. Zach is in your Year 10 class, did not hand in his assignment in yesterday's lesson. He arrives late to your Period 1 class today, and comes straight from the nearby skate park. You suspect that he's been smoking marijuana. When looking at Zach, we see a variety of issues. Firstly, Zach is disruptive. This can be demonstrated through his class clown antics when he arrives late to class, which Rogers terms as arrogant lateness, when he's essentially saying, "Hey, look at me." Secondly, upon looking at Zach's failure to submit his assignment, is almost symbolic of the "what are you going to do about it" type attitude. As previously mentioned, various punishments have been applied, yet Zach still continues to behave poorly and essentially rejects authority. Later on in the PowerPoint, we'll be looking at the suspicion that Zach has been smoking marijuana. So an overview will be touching on food for thought, assessment of Zach's behavior, looking at the positive behavior leadership model and the responsible thinking process model, application of these behavioral techniques, and 3 key questions for you, the viewer, to address at the end. So upon looking at the food for thought, we need to see, why is Zach acting out in a disruptive manner? Does Zach have a learning disability? Does Zach fail to relate the learnings of the classroom to that of the real world? Why isn't Zach submitting assignments? And why is Zach smoking marijuana? I think they're key points to just think about throughout the PowerPoint. So upon looking at the Rogers model, which will be brought in combination with that of Ford, we see that the model is to implement disciplinary action that will empower students to be accountable for their own behavioural choices, and essentially broken up into 4 principles. So principle 1, express joint rights and responsibilities, such as the right to respect one another. Principle 2, minimize unnecessary confrontation and embarrassment. Principle 3, promote the use of appropriate choices, such as offer Zach a guided choice. And principle 4, communicate expectations positively. So encourage and support, not expectations, so to speak. So an example would be, Zach, you have a lot of potential. I'd love to see you apply in your assignment. In contrast to an approach of, Zach, the assignment was due yesterday. Why isn't it done? Now, I've added a quote here from Barkley, who wrote a book called The Defiant Child. I think it really applies to Zach and his behavioral problems. The quote says, "The children who need the most love will ask for it in the most unloving ways," which arguably Zach is probably being a bit of a pain to the teacher and the class, but it could be more of a cry for help rather than anything. Now, looking at Ford's responsible thinking process, it's largely similar to that of Rogers. It's built around 4 key principles. Ask questions. So what, where? Like, Zach, what are you doing? Well, Zach, what will happen the next time you disrupt? Assisting reorganization, discussion with Zach, sort of help out. Let's find where both the goals and aspirations lie for the teacher, for Zach, and where Zach wants to be. Adopting rules. So Zach should have a clear understanding of the rules and what appropriate behavior is and isn't, especially at a Year 10 level, but it is important to continually reiterate, and even for the class, so that students understand the reasons for the rules and can respond to the rules, rather than just becoming strictly rule-bound per se. Finally, taking responsibility for the learning environment. So a relationship between the teacher and Zach really needs to be built. Through such a relationship, Zach can confide within the teacher and also build confidence and self-esteem, while the actions Zach displays may not be that of someone who appears to lack self-esteem. It's really undetermined, and he may be lacking confidence due to his poor grades or something along those lines. Now, here we've got the responsible thinking process tree. So, for example, Zach disrupts the class. As a teacher, I would say, Zach, what are you going to do? What are the rules? What are you going to do now? Zach might say, I'm sorry, I'll be quiet during quiet literacy time, for example. Zach complies. and it's successful. There are other alternatives, of course, though. Now, through addressing these problematic behaviours, for example, when Zach's late to class, we could use what Rogers calls tactically ignoring. We could continue teaching, but we could use some questions to get the class more involved and draw attention away from Zach. When Zach's distracting others, we could say, Zach, what's the rule around distracting others? However, I think in this situation, if Zach is distracting others and making his skateboard click laugh, I think it's better to address them as a group, as we don't want to specifically always point out Zach and demotivate Zach as a learner. We need to sort of address them as a group, and while Zach may be the main distractor, it also needs to be identified that skateboard clicker largely encouraging him through their laughter. In regard to Zach failing to hand in the assignment, I'd ask Zach to stay back after class. I think there's several reasons that asking Zach to stay back after class would be beneficial. Firstly, it does punish in the sense that Zach can't skateboard or be with his friends, but it also sort of separates Zach from his peers and sort of destabilizes the bad boy image that Zach may be reinforcing. So if we approach Zach about his assignment in front of his friends, Zach may be essentially a smart aleck and try to play it off as a joke and further reinforce his bad boy image per se. But if we approach him from a one-on-one perspective, we might be able to dig in and sort of emphasize the relationship that Rogers and Ford spoke about, sort of getting to know Zach a bit better and sort of understanding why he didn't submit it, and sort of really understand in a non-threatening manner. So that's one of the positives to this approach. Furthermore, it empowers the student and it allows Zach to think about his actions. However, the con is that it does require greater planning and time, and it'll lead into the teacher's lunch break along with Zach's. And also, Zach could remain defiant. And being in year 10, he could be 16 and he may not actually choose to attend school. Upon looking at democratic teaching, we can say that the emergence comes from a particular focus in understanding who Zach is as an individual, as a learner, as a student, as a person. And what motivates Zach? Is it clear? It's clear that skateboarding. However, can we link between skateboarding education? Maybe skateboarding could be leveraged as a reward. Uh, how do we encourage Zach to achieve the best results? Maybe Zach needs praise in the form of an email rather than in a classroom environment to save face with his peers, as I spoke about his image amongst classmates before. Uh, we may not want to sort of irritate Zach if we're continually, hey, Zach, great work. His friends may actually insult him being the skateboard clique, or he may lose face among the skateboard clique. So we need to sort of work out how do we encourage him. So maybe the best way is sending an email, hey Zach, great work on that essay or that report, whatever it may be. But this also coincides with gaining trust with Zach through a positive engagement while still maintaining the student-teacher relationship. So Zach respects you, you respect Zach, and he can confide and once again build on that deeper understanding. Now, Zach suspected smoking of marijuana. It's a clear breach of school policy, as schools have a zero tolerance for drugs and alcohol. My suspicions were strong enough that Zach had been smoking marijuana. I would contact another member of staff available who wasn't in class and explain the situation. A school counsellor, if available, would also be a great person to contact, and I'd want Zach removed from the class. I wouldn't want him interacting with other students, particularly under the influence of drugs. I'd also document the situation and provide the principal with my documentation, or my coordinator with that documentation, and contact Zach's parents for the suspected marijuana smoking. As the smoking of marijuana did occur off campus, it doesn't really limit the fact, as I still have the duty of care over Zach. I need to fulfill my obligations. Now, here are some other areas of exploration which didn't get to go into a greater detail as I would have liked, but parents who don't value education, this would actually have a a substantial impact on implementing the changes devised by Ford and Rogers. It sort of impedes on the model. If the parents don't really want to comply, then it sort of does break down the relationship. Uh, Also, Zach's higher than average intelligence. Maybe he doesn't find the work challenging, or he can't associate relevance to applications in life scenarios. And also, the marijuana use and the skateboarding could actually sort of be an escape for Zach. He might have personal, social, emotional problems, and he may be dealing with it through the use of drugs. Maybe there's problems at home. Who knows? Does Zach put so much effort into skateboarding because that's where he receives recognition from others? And how do we sort of combine the recognition of skateboarding and sort of bring that into the education spectrum? Yeah, three questions I'm posing to you, the viewer, is could a more appropriate learning environment be adopted to cater for students like Zach? What behavioral management technique would you apply in the scenario? What would be the best way to engage slash partner with parents like Zach?